Congressman Patrick McHenry, ranking member on the Financial Services Committee. Andrew is here. You know who he's representing. You can represent the other side. Let's just try.
I'm representing the truth.
Okay.
That's what I'm representing this morning.
The light, the truth,
democracy
the
dies
way.
in the dark. Yeah, I got that.
Right?
You're the New York
right.
Times. Okay, he's the truth or the New York Times, depending.
I feel like I call you Joe, but I feel like I must call him Andrew Ross Sorkin. Right? I think it has come out that way.
Yeah, that's true.
So I love the soft entry here. Budget battle royale, and then you follow down the line, and we have a decision point 6 months from now. This is the coverage of Washington that drives me nuts. We had the Fed chair come in this week and testify, but that wasn't the hearing that got covered, right? That wasn't the action element.
We covered
and
it.
we also,
covered it.
I appreciate that, and that's why I'm here, right? Rather than screaming somewhere else. But the big news of the week is we had annualized growth over 3% last year with all the headwinds and all the politics of last year. American growth is happening. It's real, even with the headwinds internationally, and we're seeing wage growth. We're seeing wage growth with blue-collar workers and middle class for the first time in a sustained way since we've had 3% growth, which was early 2000s. So the economic data is fantastic. The headwinds are obviously EU and UK, China, the trade negotiations. Yes, all those things are headwinds, but the fundamentals are fantastic, and that should really be a big driver of this conversation.
We're at a kind of a weird point and an important point, Patrick, where we're hearing again, and I'm not blaming either party because I wonder whether Republicans care about deficits either. But the Democrats at this point, I'm hearing things like, yeah, it would cost $94 trillion, but it's an investment, not a cost. I heard that about the whatever we want to do. Throw in, everything's in there. The whole kitchen sink is in some of these proposals. So for Republicans, I would think they'd want to focus on spending. And if we did raise taxes or so, if Republicans were to raise taxes, it should go towards deficit reduction. But, I mean, Democrats are running on expanding the entitlement state logarithmically or however you want to characterize it. They're not talking about bringing in spending, which is where the shortfall, which is why we had such a big deficit. They're talking about expanding
right,
how
the
much
biggest
we
cost
spend.
driver of our debt and deficits, healthcare. That was the work left undone.
They want to go universal. They want to go single
sure.
payer, which would.
They want to go the opposite direction, which is to really double the income to government, double all of taxes, in order to create Medicare for all and eliminate.
How do Republicans decide we're going to spend when they're ramping up defense spending? How do Republicans ever try to not spend more? How do you? In this environment,
in the House, we attempted to deal with our spending issues and to deal with the fundamentals of health care. The Senate fell flat on their face attempting to do this. I'm not proud of it, but there's a fact. I acted, and I've acted commensurate with fiscal restraint and better health care choices for individuals to be in charge of their health care rather than have a government.
I mean, the biggest expense is what we're paying on the $22 trillion, isn't it?
It is not as big as health care.
That's even
the federal
bigger.
Government.
Okay, but can we just have we can all hold hands together on this. I'm going to absolutely give it to you that we have increased wages, that we have low unemployment, all of those great things. But I would also suggest to you that they have come at a cost, and that is called the deficit, and we will have a big debate about the debt. And I appreciate that long-term we do have to deal with these costs in a meaningful way. But at the same time, I think there has to be some semblance of a recognition that the plan put in place that effectively reduced the amount of money that we were taking in as a government has put us in a more complicated place than before, and is not classically, at least, been supported by the Republican Party, because the Republican Party has historically pushed for lower debt and deficits.
But it didn't reduce what we were taking in.
True.
We took in record amount. We took in a record in revenue.
But we have both.
Didn't reduce what we took in.
Income and outgoes, right? So income. Let's talk about Republican tax policy. Yep. We've got record low unemployment. We've got wage growth as a result of tax reform and tax reduction. We just lived through the first year of it with over 3% growth.
You don't believe we should be taking in, at a time of such great economic growth and what you might describe as stability, I hope it's stable, you don't think that we should have been in a much better place when it comes to how much revenue we're bringing
So
in?
what we did with Republican tax policies, normalize income to government for the 50-year range, which is between 17 and 18% of our economy. And I think the federal government should live within those constraints of the federal government taking in less than 20% of our economy in order to make the funding situation work. We still have a massive spending problem. It is the biggest issue on my plate, I think, and a generational and multi-generational issue at this point because of the size of the debt. I think debt and deficits have a fundamental challenge in economic headwinds. I still believe in economic reality.
But most of your peers, and especially your peers in the Senate and including the president, have not wanted to take on the cost issue.
Well, the president's not a traditional Republican. I don't really have to tell you that. But the fundamentals of what we did with tax reform just normalized income to government. That's what it is. And we hit 17.1% of the economy came in as a result of our tax policies last year. And I think on a going forward basis, we're going to be between 17 and 18%. Now we got to go reconcile what we're spending and how we're spending it and prioritize it. Absolutely.
Even if the total tax take is big enough, what about the balance? Is it fair at the moment, or do you see in the next couple of years there being a slight increase on tax in the wealthy, however it comes about?
So, in terms of the mix, terms of the mix of how you're collecting that revenue,
so
and from whom?
Last week you had a discussion about the state and local tax deduction and complaints among some in jurisdictions around the country that they didn't get a good fair share out of tax cuts. So there is a class of folks that didn't see a tax reduction. And so we made a choice to focus tax relief on the middle class, and that's what we've done. I think it's successful. I think we'll see the run here is going to be a very successful
no idea how you stuck it
tax
to us
policy.
right here. And we're not mad, but you, out of all the people in the whole country, he's got agent fees that we can no longer deduct, huge agent fees.
Let me ask you a separate
and also salt. I mean, how much did your taxes go up, Sorkin?
Let me ask you a separate
question.
question.
He wants more, but he won't write a check.
Putting that aside,
he won't write a check.
One of the things that's so fascinating, though, in this country right now, according to the polls, is not just on the Democratic side, but also on the Republican side, this either this want, if you will, to tax the wealthy in a more meaningful way than before. And clearly there are plans that I would argue are even confiscatory. And the question is whether you think that any part of the Republican Party believes that they need to do something even incrementally. We've talked a lot about closing the loopholes. I wrote this column in the New York Times last week about closing loopholes, really just as a sensible way to.
Oh, no. Loopholes.
Not
on estate tax,
tax.
not in terms of thinking about carried interest in a meaningful way, not in terms of what's going on in the real estate industry, not in terms of what's going on.
The people you talk to are not happy about the carried interest compromise. I'm not either, because I think it went too far.
You think it went too far?
Oh, absolutely.
Explain that.
Well, why are we going to tax the very people that are making money for our pension plans? We most desperately need pension plans, well-funded, and good returns. So, backing out here, though,
hold on.
massive reductions.
Hold on. On carried interest, I just want to understand this. The way I see carried interest, I see an executive working at a private equity firm, venture capital firm, real estate firm, and let's call it all of those, by the way, because I think it's unfair to actually pick private equity, for example, and just do that. Okay, they are effectively they get paid a salary, right? And then they get paid effectively a bonus. Okay, the risk is in the same risk that a banker who's working on a deal for 5 years that may collapse or not is going to get. There's no skin in the game. If they have their own skin in the game, they should get a capital gains treatment. But they don't have their own skin in the game when it comes to these investments. Why do you want to actually
the current structure?
Why do you want to tax them on an income? Why do you want to tax them on a capital gains basis?
Why do you want to go tax wealth creation? That's my fundamental question. So this whole agenda.
Well, then change the whole scheme.
So I don't want to punish.
I should pay capital gains on my salary then.
But they're not using their own capital to start their own business.
I understand. We can have a whole debate about this treatment, but we've had long-term structures. Then the tax man in Washington doesn't like the action, so therefore they want to go take it. This is a structure over a long term that is a wealth creation structure.
Yeah, but the private equity company still makes the investment. It's just the boss has to pay more tax on it, which is fair.
Yes, and we have a divide based off of length of time, so you can get carried interest right now.
And by the way, there is no study that would suggest that it would actually change the incentives for the actual people working in these firms. Anyway, longer conversation. Thrilled to have him.
Happy
Joseph.
debate.
Patrick McHenry, Congressman,
Great to be with
ranking member of the. Really, thank you for being here today.